I would do an update from the one I did before. I was going to do it for our Africa Israel Weekly, but we said, sure, absolutely. So we sent it to them. It would be posting on their website, allisraelnews.com, I believe it is. So you'll see it there, and we'll send it out on our sites and everything as well. So I did an update on this issue. Sadly, like I said, in terms of disinformation in the media, the discussion of African refugees, asylum seekers, yes, the word infiltrators, which we're going to unpack that as well, or economic migrants, this whole thing, mainly from the nations of Eritrea, Sudan, some from the Congo, right? That has been going on for a long time meaning since 2006, right? This is not a new issue. Unfortunately, there would be flashpoints in the news in which there would be something bad that would happen. And then that would get picked up in the news media, and the media would pick it up, and then influencers and other people, social media, they would tell whatever the story they were telling from that point of whatever controversy had happened, particularly in Tel Aviv, which is where most of the African, the asylum seekers and refugees live. That's not only a place, but that's the most, because that's usually the first place that they would come to in fleeing the other nations and then coming through the Sinai. And we're going to break that down for you as well. So those clashes would be racially driven. They would be about immigration policy, which we're not going to really unpack here today. Israel's immigration policies, like the United States, like Nigeria, like South Africa's. We don't, at the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, we don't so much pick apart other people's policies. We deal with human rights issues, crisis, and particularly when we're talking about in the region in Israel and Africa, there's a Christian genocide going on, a genocide of religious minorities. Even most of it is Islamist driven, but there are Muslims who are dying as well in places like Nigeria, in places like Libya, where there's like over 1 million African slaves that are there as well. There's a lot to discuss on there. We won't unpack all of that. But when it comes to this issue here, over last weekend, there was a big brawl, if you will, between two separate Eritrean factions in Tel Aviv. One was pro-Eritrean government. Isaias Afwerki, I believe, is the president of Eritrea, has been since 1993. There were some who are loyal to his regime, and then there are others who are protesting the human rights abuses that they experienced there and wanting to make noise about it while they're in Israel. And those two groups had a big fight. There's something like 150 plus. I think I saw the last number may have been 170 people who were injured. 30 plus of those, 30, 40 or more, were actually police officers. I'll say it again. The violence had nothing to do with Israel. It had nothing to do with Israeli government, nothing to do with Israeli police. The violence was actually between Eritrean factions in Tel Aviv, and the police were called in to quell the violence. And by the time it happened, and of course, if 150 plus people got hurt, most of those people were actually Eritrean. So I think we have a video. I'll show you a little clip. I believe it's Jewish Breaking News. I saw different ones, but we actually pulled one from Jewish Breaking News. So, Ms. Producer, if you have that, let's go ahead and share that one first as a point of reference.
בכחול זה נגד המשטר, באדום זה בעד המשטר.
Video. A group of 100 plus on the left side, and another 100 on the right side, and now they're fighting, throwing rocks at each other, like a gang ball. And the one side is wearing blue, one side is wearing red. I don't know which one is the pro-Eritrea government, the anti-Eritrea now, but I'll go running. They're watching the news. I think some of my Hebrew speaking things were saying that they could tell that one was pro-government, again, nothing to do with this. This fight has absolutely nothing to do with Israel or the Israeli government. This is about Eritrea. This is an Eritrean fight transplanted in We know this because it has been confirmed, not just by people actually, not just by people actually filming it with their phones, but there have been follow-up articles and everything. I-24 News and other Israeli papers actually did reporting on it. Similar riots, someone just said here, thank you, Bernie, occurred in Scandinavian countries with large Eritrean immigrant populations. Absolutely. There were riots around the same time, well, including as far back as July in Germany, yes, in Norway, Scandinavian country, and also one other nation that's just escaping right now. I mentioned those in my article that'll be coming out on tomorrow. So it seems as though we don't know this for sure. We are not investigative reporters. We are not journalists, right? We don't try to act like we're journalists. We just try to share information that's actually out there as accurately as we can. And what we do know is that based on other reporting in Canada papers, I think maybe BBC or whatever, there's been a couple of other ones that talked about similar clashes between Eritreans in different nations, Norway, Germany, the other one is escaping me right now. But again, so Israel was not the only place. So again, back to Israel, this was a fight again against Eritrean refugees, asylum seekers. And yes, why do we use the term infiltrator? So the infiltrator meaning that there are some from Eritrea who are in Israel under the guise of asylum seeking, but have been labeled spies by other Eritrean refugees in Israel. Again, this is not hearsay. This is actually information that comes from on the ground in Israel, right? So in a moment, I'm going to show you another video because I'm going to give you a newscast because I want to set this up. So what you have over the past, since between 2000, get some context, between 2006 and around 2013, tens of thousands of African refugees, asylum seekers, migrant, immigrant or economic migrants, and yes, infiltrators came primarily from the nations of Sudan, Eritrea, and some from the Congo. There may have been some other African nations that were there, but those were the predominant nations. And when we say we believe between 40, 50,000, I've seen estimates as high as 60,000, as low as 30,000, right? Because, can you do a census on people who are in your country, either illegally or surreptitiously, right? Again, I'm not talking about immigration reform. For those of you who are tuned in for that, we're not discussing immigration laws. That's not the point. The point for this tonight is that over a period of time between 2006 and 2013, about 7 years or so, there have been an influx. There was an influx of refugees, asylum seekers, economic migrants, and infiltrators coming from these nations. Now, if we're just going to focus on two, then we'll focus on one. Both Sudan and Eritrea, particularly at that time, are considered even almost enemy nations of Israel. In other words, they're no friends of Israel and the Israelis, right? Thank God for the Abraham Accords, in which Sudan has now been a part of that. There are peace talks that are going on and everything. They've kind of disavowed BDS. Once again, we said BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanction, is growing in the West, but it's actually dissipating in the East, in the Arab Muslim world, and in these African Muslim worlds as well. The Morocco, Arab Muslim, Sudan, African Muslim, and everything. So we're seeing these things happen, which are great things, right? So some of this is the holdover from that time, right? Omar Bashir was the president of Sudan, and don't quote me on this, but at least around the late 1980s until recently, over the last 2 or 3 years ago, and which he's no longer in power. Sudan, for those of you who remember, was where there has been a Christian and religious minority genocide and just all kinds of horrific things happening there, particularly in the Darfur region, right? That goes back to like the late 1990s, right? So again, you can go get information on IBSI.org as well. Again, I did commercial announcement, got our shirts on, the Legacy Builders You can get this nice shirt if you become a legacy builder within the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, monthly giver, monthly subscriber, $10 or more a month. You can order this shirt, Legacy Builder. I can't see it in my camera right there. There we go, right there. Yep. And also this mug. I don't have the mug in front of me right now, but absolutely. So you can order that as well. We're a nonprofit organization. All your gifts are tax deductible. We appreciate all your support, everyone, so much for everything you've done. And shout out to our amazing IBSI ambassadors as well. So what you had was thousands of people fleeing. Thousands had been killed and millions displaced from Sudan. And if I don't have the map in front of me, but that Sudan, of course, is East Africa, as is Eritrea. They also bordered Ethiopia. You're talking about people fleeing and on foot, right? Going through towards North Africa and then the Sinai, where if they survive that long and survive the Egyptian soldiers, which would shoot on sight African refugees or decapitate them. We have these stories from IDF at the line of Sinai in which the Israeli soldiers can look over and see what's happening. They would see Egyptian soldiers torturing and killing Sudanese and Eritreans and Congolese trapped there by those forces. Those who were fortunate enough to make it past all of those things, somehow avoiding all those harrowing experiences, what would happen is that they would cross the border to where Israel was, crossing the border from the Sinai. The Israeli soldiers would pick them up, take them in their trucks, drive them to Tel Aviv, drop them off. Right? And over a period of time, again, tens of thousands of these refugees, many of them came to Israel in this way. Unfortunately, along with that were others who came to Israel under the guise of fleeing persecution, but they actually came and spying on others. Now, particularly now we'll focus on Eritrea, right? Because in Eritrea, what you have is a situation where the Eritrean refugees showed up in Israel, but also what you had were those from Eritrea, right, who were actually spying on and extorting those Eritreans in Israel and possibly in these other places. Why? And again, I'll show you the proof, because when I say the proof, in a moment, I'm going to, not yet, we're queuing it up. In a moment, you're going to see a video about 4 minutes long. And those of you who are on Instagram and in Clubhouse, you'll be able to hear the audio and everything. And so those of you on the other mediums, you'll see the video in which a good friend and our partner, shout out to Daniel Campos Putterman. He worked for I-24 News for several years, based there in Tel Aviv. We began to work together. The early days of IBSI, worked together, meaning he would send me information about things that they were reporting on. And a double shout out to Daniel and to I-24, because the story that I'm going to show you, the only place that I've ever seen it done, reported on, is Israelis I-24 News. In other words, this very, very important part of what's going on with the Eritrean refugees in Israel, most of the media will not touch it, or the influencers. But when there were clashes, when there was actual discussions about the Israeli government deporting those who had come to the land illegally, the entire discussion was about, quote, racist apartheid Israel, right? There was no curiosity about what was actually going on because of the demonization of the Jewish state, anti-Semitism. So you wouldn't have a breakthrough of actual real information. And I mentioned this in the article as well. What you had was some of the refugees, some of them that were there were some, not all, some committing crimes. You had people actually who were concerned about the violence that was going on, some of the homelessness. Many of them were sleeping in parks, and sometimes it was unsafe for children and other people. So these things were flashpoints, and some of the Israelis, they were getting angry. They were yelling and screaming because of the stuff, them not feeling safe. And some of what they said was racially driven. They used some terms about these Africans. I'm not justifying. I'm just telling you this was what was raw, what was going on. Those videos got picked up, put on social media, and went viral. And the whole story was Israelis are racist. There was no real reporting on what was actually going on. It's, for those of you who, whether you grew up with multiple siblings in the house or in the family or if you're in your classroom, that kid who would always start the fight and then he would piss and moan when somebody hit him back. and he'd tell the teacher, he hit me. And then you'd have to like get to the end of it. That's what this was. What you had was a buildup of multiple thousands, many of whom, I said this in my article as well. The article that I'm referring to is All Israel News. That will be coming out on tomorrow. Again, we'll put out on our networks and everything. That we talked about most of those stories of those thousands of Africans who fled their regions were stories of both African bravery and Israel humanitarianism. I mean, Israel, some of the Israeli universities were setting up outside scholarships for those because they can go to school and study. Many of them found work. I mean, you have in Tel Aviv, there's a particular, I believe it's an Eritrean run or is it Sudanese run nightclub that's there, businesses, daycare centers, clothing stores and everything like that. You have a huge community that's there, many of whom have become extremely productive members of society. I mean, I talked about the Sudanese actor, and if we well, we have to put that up right now, but you have this Sudanese actor, great insight. Hello, is that Pastor Brandy? Pastor Brandy, shout out to you. I'm sorry, somebody log on there. Pastor Brandy, love you, ma'am. They're down there in Alabama. You and Bishop, how you doing? So what you had was Eritreans, Sudanese, some Congolese. They're coming, starting businesses, becoming, again, very productive members of society. One of the award-winning actor who's a Muslim from Sudan, whose name is escaping me right now. And we have the link up there from as well. I-24 News did a story on him as well. I don't know if my friend Daniel was behind that. Habtam Bahari is a young gentleman who's an Eritrean refugee who lives in Israel now, got a beautiful wife and family, and is a businessman and everything. The vast majority of those who made it to Israel were grateful to be in a place where they were safe and went on about their lives, taking advantage of the freedom that they had in Israel. Yes, there were problems. All right, let's just be real. You have illegal immigrants in a country, some with some questionable motives, which we'll get to that some more. Many of whom, again, obviously the poor or destitute, or at the very least, fleeing harrowing situations, and they are wanting freedom. Unfortunately, along with that group, other people who are coming to cause problems, right? And it became, again, different flashpoints of what was going on, everything. People angry, frustrated, and all of those things. Some of you who've been following, if you have been following it, you saw that there were some Israelis who were fighting against the government at that time, who were trying to deport some of these refugees and asylum seekers, right? And they had big demonstrations and everything, and again, praise God for democracy, right? Just like the whole judicial reform going on, everything. You have Israelis protesting and signs and arguing with each other and everything. You can do that in a free country, right? So there were Israelis who were upset with their government for even entertaining the idea of either sending those refugees back or sending them to other places like Rwanda, which again, that's a whole nother discussion, but this was all being discussed in real time, right? So the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, just the other day, after this big brawl that happened there in Tel Aviv, basically announced, yeah, they get ready to leave. He said, particularly these Eritreans who were involved in this fighting and this violence, they about to pack it up and go, right? He didn't say it like that, but I'm just, using my vernacular, right? And right away, racist, that and the other, people who don't even know what's actually going on. Pause. I am not. Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel is not commenting on Israel's immigration policy, whether it's Jews who make Aliyah or whether it's illegal immigrants who've come, asylum seekers. That's not the point. The point is that this story has been going on since 2006, and you never heard about it in the media until something bad happened. And the media was uninterested in telling you about all the amazing stories. Adam Bashar is a young man from Sudan who we had the pleasure of meeting. My friend Daniel introduced me. I met him face to face along with all Black college students back in 2016. While I was on staff with Christians United for Israel, my colleague at that time, David Walker, who was over the campus ministry, we led about 30 or 40 all Black college students to Israel. We had an amazing time. And one of the things that Dave and we talked about was what we believe these Black students needed to see. So one of many things was that they needed to understand the African refugee crisis, which was already playing out in the media, and Israel was just being hammered. All kinds of lies and distortions and manipulations were going on, only to pit the Jewish state as some sort of racist apartheid regime. So Adam Bashar is a young man who lives in Tel Aviv. He fled Sudan like so many others did. At that time, he owned 1 or 2 different money exchange businesses and everything. The man was doing really, really well, right? He came and talked about it. I talked about this in a couple of articles without getting all the details. He shared the story about him being there. Check this out. And longing to return to Sudan because he wants to see his country strengthened. So he very much appreciates Israel, thanked the Israelis for allowing him to be there, to go to school, to start businesses. But his longing was to see peace come to his nation. And he was talking to those Black students and wanting to enjoin them with this move for peace in Sudan. Why am I telling you that story? Adam represents those parts of the refugees and asylum seekers in Israel. By force, they fled for their lives, and they appreciate the Jewish state, and they want to see their nations strong. My very good friend, Nomatemba Sitole, she's a Zulu from South Africa, and I met her years ago while she's living in exile she was living in Connecticut, and we had the same bishop at the time. I would come there for those different conferences and everything. We became very, very close friends. We call her Malume. I've written about her in a book and everything, Zionism in the Black Church, which you can get on ibsi.org/store. And she explained how during the fight against apartheid, there were some Black South Africans who fled, if you will, for safety for them and their families, with the full intention of returning to a free South Africa. Some went to the UK, some went to the United States, some went to Canada. And what they were waiting on, they were still fighting the fight against the apartheid government. And when apartheid fell, Nelson Mandela was released from Robben Island, and that whole scene, for those of you who are old enough to remember, you remember those images, those South African nationals returned. They appreciated their host countries, again, were productive members of those societies. And then when it was safe for them to resume and build their nation, they returned. There are many African asylum seekers and refugees in Israel with that same mindset. So they are there for safety, for security, for some of them to make money to send to their families, which are going to come to in a moment, right? And they appreciate Israel. They appreciate the Jewish state, and they are longing to return to their nations, whether it's Eritrea, whether it's Sudan, and so that they can build in a place of peace. That's the majority. I say majority. I mean, I've never done a scientific testing. I couldn't tell you by number, but I can tell you that we've heard many of those stories, and those stories are never told. So now, Ms. Producer, if you don't mind, I want you, please. Now, this is a video story from I-24 News. I believe it's in 2016. Daniel, my friend Daniel, is actually the narrator. He's actually the reporter here. And I want you to hear, those of you who are on Clubhouse and Instagram, you'll hear it. Those of you on all the other mediums, you'll see this video. Check out what this report actually is about the Eritrean community in Israel. Ms. Producer, you can go ahead.
Who supports the ruling regime and who opposes it? Who is a traitor and who is a real patriot? Eritrean asylum seekers in Israel claim Eritrea's authoritarian regime has infiltrated spies into its 34,000-strong community.
Embassies and consular services do have supporters outside Eritrea. They do also infiltrate the government's agents among the refugees and asylum seekers. The asylum seekers or refugees, they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel safe even after they left, because the regime wants still to control their lives.
The alleged Eritrean spies are working for Eritrea's ruling party, known as the People's Front for Democracy and Justice, with the mission to implant fear and impose silence on those who have fled a country which the international media often portrays as the North Korea of Africa. The spies are watching, listening, and reporting to the regime on the activities of dissidents. It is impossible to say how many there are. Obviously, no one will admit to being an informer for the regime. But there is no doubt that they do exist.
So many Eritreans are so terrified to speak about what they really went through when they were in Eritrea. So that's what it is. I mean, the regime wants to still control every Eritrean in diaspora.
Eritreans in Israel pay a 2% monthly diaspora tax out of their salaries through the embassy. Many claim that if they don't pay the tax, their families back in Eritrea will suffer the consequences. In South Tel Aviv, we meet an Eritrean political dissident who is willing to share his experience regarding the tactics used by the regime to harass and intimidate the Eritreans. He agrees to be interviewed on conditions we don't show his face. He fears his family in Eritrea might be punished or face persecution.
Whenever an Eritrean citizen goes to the embassy, to the Eritrean embassy here in Israel, he should have to pay the 2% tax. Actually, it's not only 2%, it's more than 2%. In order to get what he needs, or in order to get his rights, he should have to pay. Some of them, they may have problem within Eritrea to save their families, to save their properties over there, and some of them to have a document from Eritrea.
If they say anything in diaspora, the regime can punish their family.
After paying the taxes owed since the day they left Eritrea, those who need a passport also pay exorbitant prices to the embassy in order to get one.
$2,500, more than. The minimum is $2,500.
But to get hold of a passport, you first need to go through the People's Front for Democracy and Justice, who decide who has the right to go to the embassy. In other words, the PFDJ functions as gatekeepers.
If you are a part of opposition here, if you participate in demonstrations or some other activities against the regime, you don't pass that way. They block you in the early stage. They recognize you, they have all names, they have videos.
The split in the Eritrean community became evident in 2013, when at Kibbutz Kinneret on the Sea of Galilee, a violent battle between pro-regime supporters and the opposition took place, resulting in dozens of injured being brought to the hospital. Currently, the economy of the Eritrean regime benefits greatly from the remittances received from abroad. Most experts believe that remittances account to at least 32% of Eritrea's gross domestic product, and it continues to grow as approximately 5,000 Eritreans leave the country every month. In December of 2011, a UN Security Council resolution called on Eritrea to cease using extortion threats of violence, fraud, and other pressure tactics to collect taxes outside of Eritrea from its nationals. Whether Israeli authorities will take action to limit the activities of the Eritrean embassy in Israel yet remains to be seen.
So much in that 4-minute piece. One of the last things that he just said was that the remittance from a diaspora tax, which is internationally, in terms of international law, illegal, accounted for, this was 2016, 32% of Eritrea's gross domestic product. So, meaning it's a huge part of their economy for Eritreans to flee, work other places, and send money home. They are making money on their people leaving and sending money home to their family. If they don't pay the tax, meaning when they send money to their family, if they don't break off that part, if they're not willing for that money to be taken by the government, then their family can be harmed. Right? This is just one of the other thing that was mentioned was that in a kibbutz Kinneret, I think where it was, this is when the first clashes began, like the clash that just happened in Tel Aviv. He said that fight between the Eritreans was in 2013. I'm not all that great at math. That was 10 years ago. So for the last 10 years, the brawls or the fighting, the clashes that we all saw with these videos in Tel Aviv the other day, this has been going on for a decade. It doesn't get discussed in the media until something like what just happened. Here comes Israeli police. They're trying to quell it. Oh my God, Israel is racist. Oh my God, apartheid. See how the game gets played? And the people who are reporting, quote unquote, on it aren't telling you what these poor Eritreans who are being pimped and beat up on and extorted and lied to and terrorized. They're not telling you about that. They're telling you about how mean and evil Israel is. You see how the game gets played, right? And here's the part, ladies and gentlemen. I've said this I would say this is sometimes on our campuses all the time. It doesn't matter if you're a Zionist. It doesn't matter if you dislike it. If you're a person with a brain and a moral compass who wants right to be done, then you would stop spitting at the Jewish state in this situation and say, okay, what's actually going on with the people? Why are there tens of thousands of Eritrean and Sudanese and Congolese refugees? Don't pick up the story from the brawl the other day. Pick up the story from 2006 is how these people began to flood into the country. And you know what also kills me? Just an apartheid state so racist. Why are there tens of thousands of African refugees in Israel? They're not Jewish. They haven't made aliyah, right? My God, an apartheid state. This is why that whole apartheid thing is so stupid. Do you know what the apartheid government did to black folks who are where they weren't supposed to be? If the sun went down and you didn't have documentation and you were black and somewhere you weren't supposed to be, you could be beat up, killed, put in prison over and over. You were tortured. That's what actually happened there. So that whole apartheid thing, I don't even want to hear it, right? So you've had this situation. And again, this story that Daniel did was 2016. So by then, the Eritrean numbers were about 34,000 strong, right? They estimated not the Sudanese, just the Eritrean, about 34,000 strong, which is why we said anywhere between 40, 50, 60,000 African refugees from the different countries of Eritrea, Sudan, and Congo. Now, some of you are listening to this saying, I never heard this before. It's not because we're Inspector Detector. It's not because we're also deep. It's just this is what's been going on that the media and influencers and other people refuse. I'll call him by name because you see it. Some of you have seen it. I don't know him personally, and this is not an attack. This is just what actually happened, right? This is an example. Simon Atebe, I believe that's his name. He works for Africa News. He's a correspondent in the White House. Everything. He, like so many others, when there was the brawl and everything, and then there was the quelling of the violence, he posts a picture on LinkedIn and on his Twitter account saying Israel is shooting. On the LinkedIn account says Israel is shooting many African, I don't know if it's asylum seekers or something. First of all, Israel, I guess all 8 million people in Israel got a gun, right? Israel is shooting African asylum seekers or whatever. First of all, to our knowledge in the news information that we've seen, no one was shot or killed. I don't think anyone died. A lot of people were injured, but we don't believe the Israeli police shot anyone. Now, we may be wrong. I have to double check it again. But people are saying the clubhouse room is closed again. Okay, I'm sorry. Why is it? I don't know why it's closed, and I don't know what to do about it. All right. So people in the clubhouse, I see people that are there, but they're saying that it's closed. I don't know what it has to do to be opened, and so I'm going to have my other staff do that part for me. I'm sorry. I'm kind of maxed out on my brain. I'm if it's closed, I don't know. So you guys have to help me fix that. Apologies for those of you in clubhouse. I see you there, but they're saying that it's closed and other people can't get in. I don't know what that means exactly, and I apologize for that. So again, apologies. We'll make sure we get that all straight for everybody. All right. So Simon then tweets that, or he tweets that as it's like a 5-6 second thing of it. It looked like it was an African, someone who's African, maybe probably Eritrean, lying down in the park as if he was killed. And I said, to our knowledge, we don't know that anybody got killed, right? But beyond the fact that the fighting was between Eritreans, right? So we don't even know who this person is. And again, Simon, who's a journalist, so we called him out. It's like going, okay, that's not accurate. You got to actually tell the people what actually happened and everything. And he wound up blocking me on Twitter, which is just prerogative. I block people too, and they get on my nerves. But the thing was that here's a journalist who has been discriminated against in the White House, then goes and turns and gives false information about what's going on in Israel because Israel and Jews, right? That's what's just open season, right? Just say whatever because Israel, right? No real report. Later on, he gave some other nuanced information, but the reality of it is the whole thing that happened in Tel Aviv was fighting against pro-Eritrean and anti-Eritrean government factions. That's what it was. And it's been going on since 2013. So Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu again said, all right, these people about to bounce, right? Say what you will about it. I'm not even commenting on it. I'm saying that's how we got there. At least know how we got to where we are, right? At least understand what actually took place in order for the prime minister to get up and say what he just got through saying about sending these. I think he may have specifically talked about the Eritreans who are responsible for the violence and the mayhem and everything, sending them out. That's what that was. Now, next part. It is something that we tell our IBSI ambassadors and say with something that we say in our organization, that real leaders do the work. Meaning, if you're going to advocate, if you're going to be a person who's championing justice and everything, you have to be a person who champions truth. You can't play around with lies and think that you're going to come to some sort of justice thing. One of my favorite songs of Lauryn Hill's album, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, was how, when she talked about you might win some, but you just lost one. How you gonna win when you ain't right within, right? How are you going to prevail in your quest for justice if you're going to deal in lies and falsehoods, right? So this issue here, when we wrote about it back in 2016, again, the other articles coming up here pretty soon. Again, this is the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, Forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. I am Dumisani Washington, the CEO and founder of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Not really sure how to do anything about that on Clubhouse. I was trying to look that again. Sorry about that. And so you are at our weekly forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. Every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we come together and we discuss some of these different topics that happen here. IBSI.org is our website. We're also a nonprofit organization. You can give. Go to IBSI.org, click on donate. All gifts are tax deductible. We are a 501c nonprofit education organization here in the United States. And you can also become a legacy builder. So I'm wearing my shirt on today, legacy builder. If you become a donor, monthly donor of $10 or more, you can order one of these shirts or a mug to let everybody know that you are a supporter of Israel and you are a supporter of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. I'm also going to give a quick shout out, first of all, to Pastor Hall out there in Atlanta. I don't know if she's listening on today. We are headed to Atlanta. Those of you in the Atlanta area, on Thursday, September the 21st, I will be at Faith to Grace Ministries in Atlanta, Georgia, pastored by Pastor Matrilla Hall. Looking forward to being with them, leading an event called Africa's and Black America's Prophetic Call to Zion. Right? We'll be leading that event there, doing it live together there. Looking forward to doing that. If you're in the Atlanta area, we'd love to have you there. Just go to IBSI.org, click on events, and you'll see that event there, the Africa's and Black America's Prophetic Call to Zion. If you go to IBSI.org and click on events, and then you can RSVP for that. We'd love to see you there. Love to meet you and be with you out there. We are planning on the same title of event in the Milwaukee area. That's not set yet, but shout out to our brothers and sisters out there in Milwaukee, Pastor James Buford, Pastor Melva Henderson, Pastor Skip Henderson, Pastor Tim McMurtry, Pastor Sean Beverly, Miss Marilyn Butler. All you out there, we are planning on coming out there in the fall. We're already working with, they were trying to get that all coordinated, a multi-church event, again, for Africa's and Black America's Prophetic Call to Zion out there. We don't have a date for that yet, but stay tuned. So if you're in the Milwaukee area, we're looking to come out there sometime in October or November to host that event there as well. And if you want to join that, you pastors and leaders, on the online version of that, every third Tuesday, we come together and we have some of this virtual discussion, particularly scripturally, about Zionism, about the Black church, about Africa and Israel. The next one, I believe, is coming up on the 19th of September. So you can, once again, you can click on IBSI.org, go to events, and you can also register for that Zoom event on Tuesday, September the 19th. All right. So again, we do what we do on social media. We love to do that, be connected with you. But I'm old school, right? I like to be in the room, be at the church, be in the fellowship hall, be whatever like that. Even for our Jewish brothers and sisters, be in the synagogue and that kind of thing. So we love that. So if you want more information about that, go to IBSI.org, or you can just email us from there as well. Right. So in this discussion here, as I said before, there are a few issues in the media that are used to demonize and delegitimize the Jewish state than this situation of racism. So the African asylum seeker and migrant situation, obviously the Palestinian human rights issue and everything. And one of the ways that these false labels are placed on Israel is that people simply don't tell the whole story, right? They don't say what's actually going on. And in these spaces, and I'm just going to focus here on the Israel part of it, there has to be the willingness, there has to be the intestinal fortitude, there has to be the moral direction, if you will, to tell the truth, right? To actually bring as much as one can, factual information to actually resolve situations, right? We talked about the situation, which I won't get into now again, about Oakland, California. I'm from California. I'm from the Bay Area and from the Valley. Grew up that whole area. And Oakland, the NAACP is crying out, and other black leaders in Oakland, because the defund the police and the whole, there's no jobs, there's the violence, there's the mayhem, there's all of these things. And they're crying out, wanting a state of emergency. They're completely being ignored by the same folks who consider themselves social justice warriors, putting black squares up there, talking about Black Lives Matter, all that stuff. You have cities like Oakland and Baltimore and Chicago, different ones who actually are suffering some of the backlash of all the violence and the mayhem that really had nothing to do with advocating for justice, but was about, unfortunately, dismantling communities, everything. Now those communities are even more vulnerable than they were before, and most people have moved on. We talked about that before. I'm not going to get onto that again, but again, to be able to really speak truth to power means to really be honest about what's actually going on. This African refugee and asylum seeker issue in Israel, right? Which again, while we showed you these video clips, and again, we put the links up there as well, especially that I-24 News, of those of you who want it. It's still there on YouTube, right? So we put the link there so you can actually view it yourself, share it with your friends, share it with your church, share it with your synagogue, at least tell the people what's actually going on. These Eritrean refugees there are being extorted by Eritrean spies. Again, not my words, not I-24 News words. Those of you who saw that video clip or heard that video clip, every voice that you heard, other than Daniel, who was actually the reporter, was an Eritrean refugee. So if you didn't see, if you were on Clubhouse and on Instagram and you just heard the voices, other than Daniel's voice, every other person, no name was mentioned, right? Of course. And about 4 different people were interviewed. One, it was a young lady. Her face was seen. Her name wasn't on there, but it said Eritrean refugee. The other gentlemen that were talked to, both in the park and other places of Tel Aviv, their names, their faces were blurred out, and it just said Eritrean refugee. So you heard in their own words, no one was being filtered. They were telling us, here is what we are dealing with in Israel. We are here. We fled our country. We are trying to work. We're trying to send money back home. We want freedom for our nation. And others have come from our country who are harassing us, who are charging us $2,500 for a passport, who are saying that if we actually engage in protest against what's going on in our country, our families will be harmed. They're saying it. So you got to ask yourself the question, where was the media telling this story? I'm talking about the mainstream media now, not I-24 News and the other Israeli papers. Why was no one giving them a voice? Why were they willing to talk about the clashes and the difficulties that actually happened, anything that looked like racist or anything like that? Why were they willing to say that, but unwilling to tell you what was actually going on with you? Why these people were in Israel and what was actually going on with them? Why? You know why? Because they're cowards. See? It's more popular and easier to dump on the Jewish state. So instead of really telling you, and this is how everybody loses, everyone. So not only is Israel being demonized, right? These people who are actually trying to have their voices heard, here they are in a free nation in which they can speak freely and tell people, hey, I fled Sudan, Eritrea, Congo, whatever, and I want you to know my story. What you see is that there are many in the media who don't care about that story, right? They don't care. Why did they flee Sudan? Why did they flee Eritrea? What was actually going on? And I made this point in the article that will come out in All Israel News. The migrant situation, ladies and gentlemen, is only going to get worse. Not all. In certain African nations, as in other parts of the world, people are fleeing unlivable conditions, trying to get somewhere where they can be free. That's not stopping. That's actually going to increase, whether it's economically, whether it's because of terrorism, right? We pray to God that the terrorism will quell. We're praying for the nations, and we all that you pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I can tell you that right now, very smart people, journalists who are African, other parts of the world who do these types of things, diplomats who are aware, people who we talk to, they are letting us know there are things going on in the Congo that most people don't even know about. And I'm not just about the cobalt, where kids are actually digging to give the materials to make our batteries for our electric cars. Even beyond that, right? There are things that are happening in some of these regions that are unspeakable. And so there will continue to be ways that whether they go to Europe, whether they go to the United States, whether they go to Canada, this will continue. So it would behoove journalists, international community, United Nations, African Union, it would behoove all those involved and responsible to deal with actually why these people are fleeing and not just what's happening to them when they get somewhere else. Now that you can't discuss that. Oh, some places when they get to places like Europe, how they get shot at the borders of certain these nations, which is a whole nother conversation. I already told you what happens to them in the Sinai. Do you know there's a part, and Miss Producer, you can put that link up there. There was a piece that was done back in 2012, I believe, in Ynet News in Israel about a whole organ harvesting ring in the Sinai that Hamas was a part of, harvesting the organs of these Sudanese and Eritreans that were caught in the Sinai. While Hamas lies about what Israel is doing to it, Hamas is engaged in removing the organs and torturing Africans in the Sinai. And the rest of the media completely uninterested in reporting on it, right? So they go, how are you a black man stand with Israel? You idiots. Do you recognize what these Islamists are actually doing to black people there? The millions of slaves in Libya? Are you kidding me? Right. So this was actually happening. Still hasn't been reported on widely in the news. I mean, CNN just a couple of years ago finally started talking about the Libyan slave trade. Thank you. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I mean, that's a bad thing. Good. Thank you. CNN, I know your time, right? It took a while, but yeah, that's good. We need a little bit more of that, right? To bring some attention to it. Instead of every other story being about Israel committing genocide against the Palestinians, which is a lie. Israel being an apartheid state, which is a lie. This is what I'm saying. Everybody pays for that anti-Semitism because real issues don't get discussed. I mean, real human tragedy with real genocide, not the metaphorical genocide, right? This actually happening, right? Yes, I'm fired up about it. There has to be then for those of us in this space, just leaving in the Israel space, I can go to different places, the willingness to then tell the truth, to actually bring real information, right? So that people can be informed, people can be knowledgeable, right? And that there are solutions that can work. The Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel partners with iabolish.org, an organization started by our friend and colleague, Mr. Charles Jacobs. Again, we'll have some more information about that later. I've mentioned that a few times, but there's some things we're kind of working on, and it is an anti-slavery organization, and it's focused on the African region where there are millions of slaves. It's time, as we said, for a new abolitionist movement. The world is silent about these things. Then there, again, as much as we can, are to do good and bring light. And one of those things that IBSI does, other than seek to strengthen the Africa-Israel Black-Jewish Alliance, is actually bring awareness to what's going on there in the region. That while, again, these organizations are demonized in Israel, you have slaves in the region and genocides out through some parts of Africa and other parts of the Middle East, and nothing, silence. So that has to change. So I hope that helps you. Now, a few minutes left here. Again, this is the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, our weekly forum on Israel, Africa, and Black America. I'm Dumisani Washington, the founder and CEO of IBSI. You go to ibsi.org, find out more about our organization. We're also a nonprofit organization, and all your gifts, not only are they tax deductible, not only are they appreciated, they help us do the work that we do, whether we're doing forums, whether we're doing other online things, whether we're headed on the road. I want to say something. I'll give you guys a shout out about what we're doing in Atlanta. Also, again, Legacy Builder, you'll see that on there. You can become a Legacy Builder. Legacy Builder is a monthly giver to Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. Start at $10, as little $10 a month. You can do 20, 50, 100, 1,000, whatever. And we consider you a Legacy Builder, part of that group. You get inside information. You can order this wonderful shirt, Legacy Builder. And also the coffee mug for that. And this we are just expressing our thanks to you. The events that I mentioned, the Atlanta event, the upcoming Milwaukee event, where we're doing the event that's called Africa and Black America's Prophetic Call to Zion, they are at no cost to the host, meaning we do have speaking fees and things that we request if they can do them, but we work with those organizations, we work with those churches so that they don't have to come out of pocket. So our donors make that possible, right? We speak in synagogues, churches, and sometimes colleges, not as much as universities and everything, but we do that more limitedly now and everything. And so particularly when we are working with these houses of faith, we try to work with, as much as we can, budget and everything. We try to make it completely no cost to them. And the only reason we can do that is because of our donors. So just know that as you give, you help with our Peace Initiative, Plan for Education, Advocacy, and Community Engagement. You help with our outreach as we go out into these different with these pastors, these rabbis, the community centers, and you help with our ambassadors even after the Peace Initiative as they'll be doing their work out there as well. So I want to make you mindful of that. I won't have time to unpack it all, but I do want to say one other thing before we start to head out and everything. We're here for about an hour each time, and sometimes we go a little bit over mainly because I talk a lot and everything. But again, so I hope that part was helpful with what's going on with the African asylum seeker and refugee situation in Israel. There's also something that we want everyone to be aware of. The anti-Zionist curriculum in Africa, in California, what's called critical ethnic studies. It even if I did the whole hour on that, we could never really completely delve into it. So I want to make you aware of what we feel are 4 crucial articles that you need to read. If you want to know the latest in what's going on in the curriculum there in California, in the critical ethnic studies, make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, it's pro-BDS, it's Israel's apartheid state, all that stuff. It's for the high school. The college curriculum was made law for all the UC schools back in 2020. IBSI's been part of this fight in terms of real education since around 2018, in terms of going to different meetings, regent meetings, and that type of thing, and speaking out, writing. It's very concerning. There's a whole institute that's called the Institute for the Critical Study of Zionism, right? There's a whole portion of the curriculum that's dedicated to, it says, delinking Zionism from Judaism. Why is an ethnic studies curriculum focused on Jews and Israel and Zion? What is it? Are we focused on the Indian homeland, on the Kenyan homeland? No, it's focused on Zionism, right? There's much more than that. So there's 4 articles that we posted on there for you, so that you can check those out. Of the 4 articles, they're written by actually 3 of our colleagues. David Bernstein of oh boy, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the organization. I'm sorry, David, my brain is doing that thing. Dr. Brandy Shupatinsky, hope I'm saying your name right, Miss Brandy, and also our friend Tammy Rossman Benjamin of Amcha Initiative. Between the 3 of them, now there's not the only ones, and we are definitely not sliding other people out there doing real work when it comes to sounding these alarms and working within this framework of trying to remove all this hatred, racism, anti-Semitism from our curriculums. These kids are being brainwashed in these schools, right? And it's really, really bad. But we of the latest articles, a couple of them from the Jewish Journal, one is in the J Post. I think a couple of them are op-eds, the other ones are just reporting. We want you to check those out, right? We have them on there, I believe. Yes, if we have a link that's on there, it's on our Facebook page. You'll see the actuals and what you need to know about California's critical ethnic studies. I encourage you to check out those articles, read them, so that you are informed. Share them with your community, share them with your pastors, with your rabbis, share them with your colleagues. Those of you who are in California, shout out. I always have to walk this line. I wasn't born, but raised there from a baby. My wife was born and raised. We moved in 2020. We now live in North Carolina. And it was for those of you maybe thinking, we weren't protesting, California's Marxism or all of the kind of stuff. It was just ministry wise and other things. It was time for us to make this move. I said often to our family, we have a big family. They're all grown, but those that were still around us came and moved out here with us as well. My father moved my family to San Francisco, California in around 1968 when I was just a baby from Little Rock, Arkansas. And so for these couple of generations or over a generation, my family was transplant from the South to the West Coast. And it seemed like it was on me to take my family from the West Coast back to the South. And it was just a timing thing. And there's so much that had been going on. We traveled quite a bit, planted a ministry there, the Congregation of Zion. Still serve as the bishop over the congregation. We are starting the East Coast, Charlotte, North Carolina branch of that ministry here as well. But it was a time for us to make that move. And so we are here now. And I'm saying all that to say what I have been observing what's going on in California education, other forums. I can talk about to you about the homeless situation. Again, when you talk about things that aren't reported by the media, whoo boy. I was old enough. I grew up in California, so we saw what happened. The sea of humanity. These people who are drug addicted, who are mentally disturbed. They need help. They are being manipulated and used. Oh my goodness. In such a demonic way. Right. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I can't even unpack that and everything. And so that's just a couple of the many, many things that are going on. But California has also has been for a long time, just like the epicenter of this anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic propaganda. Right. And as California goes, so goes many. I mean, the curriculum that was started, it's spread all over the country, right? They take their own different version, but the critical ethnic studies curriculum, man, that stuff is dangerous, right? We are brainwashing. I'll never forget again, Arab-Israeli journalist Khaled Abu Tuame back in 2009. We shared his article many different times. You can check it out on Gatestone Institute, and I'm just doing this on a whim right here, but he talked about it. He came to speak in different colleges back in 2009, couldn't really get his speech going because all the protests and all the threats and everything. He went back to Israel and he wrote an article, basically said the next terrorists aren't coming from the mountains of Pakistan, Afghanistan, or from the Gaza Strip. They're coming from U.S. college campuses. This is an Arab-Israeli journalist. After viewing the situation in 2009, he said they're being so radicalized in the United States, the next terrorists are coming from there, right? Here we go. What's that? 14 years later, it's only gotten much worse, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I dare say the main thrust of that is coming out of California, right? Many people are not aware of that. Shout out to Rob. I see you there in Israel. Man, it's been the middle of the night. See that? I got my Israeli friends, and I know I do this at night, but it's like in the middle of the morning out there. But some night owls are out there. Rob Mordecai out there. Shout out to you. Get ready to close up in here. I see Dan up there. And again, and those of you on Clubhouse, thank you so much for tuning in. They say that the room is not open. So I just turned it on, but somehow it's not public, right? People can't see it. And now those of you who are there, I don't know how you see it, but somehow everybody can't see it. So my staff, which wasn't really with me today, the rest of them, they weren't able to be here. I'll have them fix that. I guarantee you, so that as we resume and we come together on next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'll make sure that the clubhouse is open so everybody can join. Those of you, Mr. Mike Lee, Mr. Mike out there in Stockton, California. What's up, Mr. Mike? Big Mike on the bass. And those of you here, I'm sorry, I'm getting all a little familiar, my bad. Those of you who've joined us, I want to thank you so much. Again, all the information that we shared, the Eritrean, the story of them being extorted by Eritrean spies in Israel, that story is out there. It's on the I-24. That link is out there on our channels. The other thing about what happened, the brawl and everything and stuff, so that you can be informed, right? So as next time you hear the Israeli government talking about deporting some of the African refugees, whether you agree with that or not, at least you'll have more of a background of the story of what's actually going on there. And then for those of you in terms of the California, the ethnic studies, and not just California, it's impacting education across the country, right? That's where a lot of this Jew hatred is actually coming from our academic centers back in both high school and on college campuses. And we need to be aware of those things as well. All right. So appreciate you guys here. One more thing here, because you'll see all of our articles. If you go to IBSI.org, click on Africa Israel Weekly, you'll see all of it's our Substack. You'll see the different articles that we've written. We share this information. We shared our focus at IBSI first and foremost is education. We want to be able to inform. And again, your charitable giving empowers us to be able to do that, whether it's online, whether that's going to across the country, or whether that's taking our IBSI ambassadors, our IBSI pastors to Africa and to Israel. Again, it only happens by your giving, and we so appreciate it. So, all right, let's get that queued up here. We're ready to bounce, everyone. So grateful to be with you here on this evening. We can queue it up. And every Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern, we're here. Want you to join us. IBSI.org is our website. And when you see IBSI Now or Dash Now on all of our social media. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. This will be posted on everything once it's all done. The links will still be there. You'll see some clips a little bit later on as well. But thank you for joining us, everyone. Hope this was informative. Give us a shout out, email us, send us some notes, tell us what you think. There's other topics you want us to cover, let us know that as well. All right. Good night, everybody. Have a great week.